Hey, quick disclaimer, Pressure just dropped the biggest update they've ever dropped so far, and this is part 1 of 4. Now, I love this update, don't get me wrong, but it does mean that a lot of the video I was originally working on has become outdated. I opted to continue working on the original video, but I'm going to be replacing and updating parts that have changed so that I can get this video out in a somewhat timely fashion. It's been several months, it's not timely anymore. I've completely rewritten, re-recorded, and re-edited any sections with major changes, and any minor bits of new content that I feel are relevant will be pointed out with tooltips like this one. Anything else that needs correcting after this video goes up will be corrected in the pinned comment. On top of that, this being an update this big means there will be things I miss, so feel free to yell at me for that in the comments. On to the video. A lot of you are asking for a Pressure video, should I do one? Okay, it might have taken me a while, but I'm finally talking about Pressure. This is a game I was unsure about talking about at first, because I thought it might just end up being a rehash of the Doors video. But as it turns out, Pressure has a lot of cool and interesting ideas to present. I also ran a poll and you guys said you wanted it. Only took 9 months to put a script together and record it. Hey everyone, my name is Skit and I like to study game design and video games that I play. Today's subject of choice is Pressure, a Roblox Doors-like game that was a popular request after my very late Floor 2 video. This one is still even later though, so... In this video, I want to discuss several of the game's entities, its grand encounters, and a handful of other things. If you're interested in any particular part, you can use the chapters below to skip anywhere in the video. There's a lot that I didn't cover in this video too, so if you want more on this game, please feel free to let me know in the comments. Just to be clear, this video is not going to be comparing Pressure and Doors, or any other Doors-like games, because, to be frank, I find those discussions to be pretty unconstructive. I don't want to state an opinion like it's a fact, and the question of which game did it better is pretty subjective. Except it's not the best one, it's clearly Doors but Ohio. I have kept you all waiting long enough, several months in fact, so let's get right into it. As per tradition, every Rooms-like game is required to have some kind of node entity, that being an entity that, commonly a simple 2D image, will signal to the player that it's on its way somehow before moving through all the rooms in a linear fashion. I can't name a single Doors-like that doesn't have an entity like this, and Pressure is no exception. Meet the Angler. This fella will flicker the lights through the black site to signal its arrival before dashing through the rooms rather quickly. You survive by either hiding or getting out of its way. Sound familiar? Well, that's because it's been done so many times before. Pressure, however, has a few tricks up its sleeve. 4 of them, to be specific. Cue Pinky, Frogger, Blitz, and Chainsmoker. These are Angler variants. They function nearly identical to the main Angler, but have been tweaked a bit in their gameplay to spice things up. Pinky is pretty much exactly the same, except instead of disturbing the lights at all, she's just really, really loud. To avoid her, you're going to have to pay attention to the noises you're hearing. Frogger is also very similar, but will pass by you a few times, meaning you're going to have to leave your locker early just to get back in again. I didn't mention that, did I? Right, lockers aren't somewhere you can stay forever. After a bit of time has passed, you start panicking, forcing you to leave the locker to calm down before you can close yourself in again. Now you know, Blitz will flicker the lights twice to signal its arrival. It's incredibly fast, and the moment you hear it, you need to hide. It'll put your reaction time to the test. Finally, Chainsmoker. Unlike Blitz, Chainsmoker is really slow. However, the gas it's spewing greatly reduces the time you can stay hidden for. You need to get in as late as possible, challenging your timing skills. With these simple gameplay tweaks, the anglers become miles more interesting. They test a range of your skills, or a Frogger, while still remaining true to the simple node entity formula. Now, there's one other node entity we haven't talked about here.
Oi, boss. I was able to recover bodycam footage from the expendable we found outside your office.
Excellent. Play the tape then. Let's see what got this poor sucker.
Boss? What was that thing?
No, it can't be. I didn't believe it was real.
Boss? What are you talking about?
That thing They called it. They called it.
What? What did they call it?
Minigames! Minigames! Minigames!
Oi, what?
Pandemonium throws a complete spanner into the works. While the angler follows a set path and just passes by you, once Pandemonium knows you're there, it's relentless and will do whatever it can to get you. First notable difference is that Pandemonium can actually see you. If Pandemonium spots you, you must hide in a locker to survive. There's no other way around it. It will pathfind to your location and pursue you no matter how much you run. If you're able to get into a locker before it kills you, you're going to notice the next big change. Minigames! Pandemonium requires you to play a minigame to survive, and a stressful one at that. You have to keep your cursor in the middle of the screen while Pandemonium knocks your locker and cursor around. Heavy rock is blaring in your ears, Pandemonium is screaming at you, they forgot to multiply the cursor movement by delta time, causing it to move around more on a higher frame rate. It's a lot to take in, but survive this game for long enough and Pandemonium will give up entirely, leaving you in peace. At least for now. The game doesn't actually consider Pandemonium an angler variant, and while that's likely due to lore reasons rather than gameplay, it also has some gameplay benefits. Pandemonium is so different in approach to the anglers that having its own document is very beneficial. He's just too far separated from the others. Now, one question I do have is, how does this minigame work on mobile and console? Is it any good? I actually don't know if it is. If anyone watching this knows, please inform me in the comments. Are the non-PC versions complete arse? Because I don't even know how you would translate this outside of a mouse and keyboard setup. I really don't know what they would have done. Yes, I have access to playing it on that platform, I'm just lazy as hell. Anyways, the anglers in Pandemonium are greatly designed. They spin off the classic formula we've seen for years and make something new out of it. Not enough that you have no idea what you're doing, but enough that they're fresh and exciting to play. While Pressure has plenty of entities and game mechanics we could talk about, there's one other thing I see this game excel at that I feel doesn't get talked about nearly enough, and that's the game's visual storytelling. Pressure absolutely loves to tell its story through all sorts of mediums, but the rooms themselves are where they really shine. While a lot of rooms might just be generic hallways, there's all sorts of interesting details that have been included to tell a story. Rubble all over the floor, cracks in the glass, holes in the walls, entities and anomalies lurking in the shadows or corrupting the rooms. All these small, seemingly minor details tell a story of how this once steadfast, tightly knit site had fallen to pieces so quickly. Pressure also seems to absolutely love creating massively scaled, dramatic rooms for huge chunks of story to take place. I think the best example of this is this room right here, where they've captured an angel and are exploiting it. Not only does this room tell a story about the angel and how it's been doomed to suffer here for who knows how long, possibly eternity, but the scale just makes it feel so dramatic and heavy. This room doesn't just tell us about this angel though, but also about its captors. Urban Shade are powerful enough to not only defeat an angel, but detain it. They're corrupt enough to allow it to endlessly suffer for their own gain. The Urban Shade Corporation is run by some pretty awful people, and while we get to see this in several documents and lines of dialogue, this room communicates all of this to us without a single word being spoken. The visual storytelling here is just immaculate. Speaking of things that are grand, we're just about at our first grand encounter. There are 3 grand encounters you can run into, but the first one for today, dubbed the Searchlights, is guaranteed to spawn at some point every run. You'll know this encounter is coming when you come across this tram station. Before proceeding, you will have to fix the apparatus in the middle of the room. This minigame is a key part of the grand encounter, as we'll see later, and this room helps familiarize yourself with it before throwing you into the deep end. Although, given there's only one breaker box, its effectiveness in a multiplayer run is a bit questionable. If a run is all new players, only one player will be able to learn how to do the puzzle, whereas in a lobby with more experienced players, they're likely to make it to the puzzle first and complete it before the people who need to see it do. It's not a very big hiccup for anyone playing with friends, playing solo, or already familiar with the game, but it's still something I'd like to make note of. Anyways, board the tram station and enjoy the view of our newest enemy, the Vultus Luminaria. I was supposed to fail that for a gag. I wasn't expecting to get that first time. Better known as the Searchlights. This is a big old fish who swims in the floating water thingamajig on the ceiling of the lunar dock, scanning the ground for its prey. Once a meal has been caught in its light beams, they'll fire a harpoon-like appendage towards their prey to fish it up to their mouth. Upon its first few attempts, it'll likely have trouble grabbing onto you, either missing or only dealing small hits of damage. But stay in its sights for too long and you'll be caught. triggering an insta-kill. You can hide from the beams by cutting off the Searchlight's line of sight, which is most easily done by getting underneath something, but be careful because not all of these hiding spots are totally safe. In order to pass this section, several broken apparatuses need to be repaired. The number required does scale depending on player numbers, and you'll likely have more broken apparatuses in the room than you actually need to fix. While fixing these apparatuses, you can't see anything around you, which makes it dangerous to fix if the Searchlights are nearby. Something that I love about this section is that everything is very well explained to the player. As previously mentioned, you get a chance to familiarize yourself with the apparatuses, what they look like, how they work, all that sort of thing, before the danger actually comes into play. The Searchlights themselves are very well introduced with this cutscene. Opening the door will show you a corpse getting spotted by the Searchlights and then promptly being impaled by their harpoons and fished up into its mouth. The environment for this encounter was also clearly put together with the Searchlights in mind. There are several places to shelter in, some of which can be destroyed by the Searchlights, as well as these conveyor belts which can either hinder you if you're heading their way, or give you a boost to help you get away from them. There's even several switches around to let you switch the conveyor's direction should you desire that. And, to top it all off, the soundtrack for the section absolutely slaps.
Okay, I've been praising Pressure enough. Time to talk about my critique. In Pressure's early days, one of its strongest appeals was that the game would allow you to swim. This was pretty unique, and I can't think of another Doors-like with a mechanic like this to this day. However, as it turns out, it's actually a pretty forgettable mechanic. Any mechanics it introduces are heavily underutilized and have a lot of potential to be cool and interesting, but because of how it's handled, swimming just becomes a bit of a slog. The main difference between being underwater and on land is the ability to move in 6 directions freely without restriction, and a notable lack of gravity. This seems great on paper, but in practice, very few rooms take advantage of your new abilities to move up and down. There's a handful that do, some of my favorites being these pipe mazes and this one which makes you cross a chasm, both of which utilize the unique abilities that swimming offers. Unfortunately, these rooms are very limited, and the majority of the underwater rooms are the same as the dry rooms, but now some stuff is floating. Add onto it this weird janky camera movement when you stop and start swimming, and you have a room set that isn't really that fun to go through. The other thing that I think is holding back the underwater sections of Pressure is a lack of underwater threats. The only threat when you're down here are these parasites, which, to be honest, are working against what the water mechanic has going for it. When you're underwater, you'll notice these green beacons, which mark a path for you to follow. These are really useful for finding your way, but unfortunately, straying away from these beacons will cause you to be swarmed by parasites. Not only is this an enemy that is incredibly easy to avoid, but it's also an enemy that discourages using the very mechanics that make underwater sections unique. All the new movement tech would be so much better utilized if you could explore your surroundings, but any rooms big enough for that to happen are infested with parasites whose job it is to make sure you stick to the path that the devs laid out. This feels like the opposite of what should be happening. I understand wanting to ensure the player doesn't swim out of bounds, but this is already a job performed by the PDG, so I really don't see a reason for this hazard to exist. The only time swimming really gets used to its full potential is at the very end of the game, which we'll talk about soon, but that still leaves every other underwater room leading up to it feeling lackluster. If there was some kind of entity that was exclusive to water rooms, similar to how squiddles and candlebearers are exclusive to dark rooms, this would by itself make underwater rooms a whole lot more interesting. Obviously, like the squiddles and candlebearers interacting with the light sources you need to use to see, this new enemy would need to somehow interact with the way you move through the underwater rooms. I don't have any ideas as to what this entity could be, but it would be a really interesting and welcome change. I feel that swimming would benefit greatly if the player was given some reason to use the upward and downward swimming mechanics or their ability to cross gaps with ease. However, in its current state, it is simply not utilized well, and I think it should be explored more. There's a lot of potential, but right now potential is all it is.
Our first new grand encounter is the Abomination. This part of the game has you swimming through the maintenance tunnels of the Black Site, but with one of Urban Chain's Nost brand gliders. In gameplay terms, that means you're swimming insanely fast and cannot stop unless you turn the glider off, which you're about to see is something you probably don't want to do. The introduction to the glider is masterfully done here. Firstly, it controls very similarly to regular swimming, meaning that most players will already be somewhat familiar with what to do. Secondly, this first room's design is very accommodating to first-time users of the glider, while not being tedious for people who have already used it. You start out in open waters, which gives you time to take in the feeling of having a speed boost and not being able to stop. Once inside the actual tunnels, you're guided through a very simple section to get you used to how the glider works, as well as to build tension for what's about to happen next. You're given a few fans to maneuver through, which is important because we'll be seeing a lot of those later. And now we come face to face with the Abomination itself. After this short cutscene, we're thrown right into the deep end, and things really start hitting the fan. No, but seriously, I keep hitting these fans, I suck at dodge. Not only is there a big scary fish chasing you, but the tunnels themselves don't seem to be in the best shape anymore. Steam pipes are bursting as you approach them, walls are crumbling, and there's a lot more you have to pay attention to. As you dodge and weave through all the obstacles being thrown your way, you'll eventually find yourself in some more open areas with more wiggle room, and often sea mines. This gives you more freedom to move around, but also gives the Abomination a clear shot to charge at you, and it will not let this opportunity go to waste. If your glider starts telling you there's danger behind you, well, no duh, it's been there for the whole time, but also you might want to start strafing, unless you want to be this beast's lunch. This is all pretty well telegraphed to players. This isn't to say this encounter comes without its shortcomings. There's a few rooms that I feel do a pretty poor job of guiding the player on where to go, which is a bit frustrating. This encounter is all about reaction and timing, so being thrown into the dark and not knowing what your next move should be doesn't feel like it's the player's fault. On top of that, the glider sometimes doesn't feel like it's in your control. This tends to happen when the glider is grazing the floor and you suddenly look up and just don't go up for a while. This is also pretty frustrating, but it does seem more like a bug than an intended feature. I normally don't bring up bugs in these videos because I prefer to focus on the actual design of the game and not unintended jankiness or errors, but sometimes they're a bit too hard to ignore and they do impact the overall enjoyment of the game. Back to things I like about this encounter, these environments look stunning. The maintenance tunnels sound like they'd be boring, but they look pretty good while also not being distracting from the main focus. And these outdoors sections, especially this one with the trench bleeder, look awesome, even if you don't really get the time to appreciate them because of how quickly you move through everything. And oh man, the soundtrack, just listen to it. One other thing worth noting is that if you have trouble with this encounter and you're playing with a friend, you can hop on their back and put your life into their hands. This is a good way to balance an accessibility feature that lets you basically skip the entire encounter. But if you do want to make this encounter easier, you can enable Chase Assist, which gives you more reaction time during the Abomination encounter. It does also make the Firewall encounter easier, which some people aren't going to be a fan of, but having a caveat for something like this isn't the worst thing ever. Turrets might just be one of the most unique hazards that Pressure has to offer. Turrets will sweep the room for players, and anyone unlucky enough to be caught in their line of sight will have a torrent of bullets sent their way. These turrets can be disabled if someone is able to reach a lever placed strategically in the room, allowing all other players to pass through safely. One interesting thing to note about these turrets is that they don't spawn randomly. They only appear in custom-built rooms with hiding spots built into them. On top of that, each turret is given its own custom turn speed and spread angle to suit the space that it's in. The developers have intentionally built each turret room to feel fair and fun, so when a player dies to a turret, it never feels like it's the game's fault. On top of that, after being fired a certain number of times, turrets will retract to reload their ammunition. So, if you happen to be struggling in a particular spot, the turret eventually will give you a safe window to move before it reactivates. There's so much variety in the kinds of rooms you can have. You can have one turret, or 3 turrets. Some turrets sweep big, wide rooms, while others are observing small, narrow hallways. There's so much variety in how this simple mechanic is used, and it makes every encounter with these turrets feel unique and different, all while maintaining the exact same mechanics that feel familiar. It's very impressive how it's done. It's clear a lot of thought went into making them, and I'm really glad the devs took the time to carefully put together every turret room to maximize the enjoyment and minimize the frustration. I love platforming games, so Pressure's new platforming-centric encounter, the Firewall, was an instant win for me. In this encounter, you have to platform across a series of obstacles while the aforementioned wall of fire is advancing towards you. There's a lot of cool movement in this area, and when you do get it right, you feel like the coolest person alive. This section is the only grand encounter that doesn't really build off any existing mechanics, but there is a tutorial the first time you play, and anyone who really struggles with it is able to sit it out as long as at least one person makes it to the end. Is that punch a baby in public for? Oh my god, I love this game. It's my favorite. For players who still want to go through this encounter but have difficulty with it, like the Abomination, you can enable Chase Assist, which will automatically do all the jumping and dashing for you. All you need to do is guide the player, and the game will handle the rest. The added movement abilities include jumping, double jumping, sliding, dashing, swinging off monkey bars, and wall running. All of this is completely new and doesn't feature anywhere else in the game. That's a lie, they actually added jumping when you use the sprint item. And while part of me thinks this isn't the best route to go because it can make first encounters with it overwhelming for some players, there's a much bigger and louder part of me that thinks this section is fucking awesome. To be fair, both can be true. The initial difficulty spike can definitely put some players off. Without adequate time to learn and understand some of these mechanics, some players are bound to find this encounter frustrating. Yes, there's a tutorial, but it does go over everything rather briefly, and I've seen a few people somehow miss the inclusion of the dash mechanic. Now, I absolutely love the Firewall, but that's because I've played so many platformers before. For someone with much less experience with platformers, this encounter is a lot to take in at once. One little nitpick I would like to mention is that when someone breaks the glass, it breaks for everyone. This doesn't sound like it would be a big deal, but what it does do is it disrupts the flow for everyone behind the person in the front. The glass panels are doing a great job at guiding you where to go and when to dash, but if they break for everyone when one person goes through them, all these other players are not going to have the same indicator that the first one did. Again, slight nitpick, you can see where the glass panel was, but it is still something that I feel can be changed and probably should be changed. But after getting a good grip on the new mechanics, this section becomes a blast to play. The course is assembled from a huge variety of different rooms, meaning no two playthroughs will ever be the same. The combination of the music blaring in your ears, your momentum, and your speed is making you feel cool as hell. Add on to that the giant flamethrower that's chasing you down the course, and this encounter feels thrilling and tense. But no, seriously, listen to this music! Have I ever mentioned how good the soundtrack for this game is? Because there are so many bangers, it's insane. Don't even get me started on the Graveyard soundtrack. Dude, I love that thing. So you remember the grand encounter from earlier with the Searchlights, right? The final encounter is basically if you took that, cranked it up to 11, and waterboarded it. The final encounter with the Searchlights takes place in a vast, open area on the outskirts of the Black Site. This area is entirely open ocean, and of course, you aren't alone here. Searchlights have made their return. Probably the first thing you'll notice about this encounter is that you're swimming for its entire duration. But, unlike the previous water sections you may have encountered, I feel this area does a much better job of utilizing the movement abilities you're provided with. You can swim up or down to hide effectively in certain hiding spots, and there's several levels to work with, which you can access using your swimming abilities. All three axes are properly utilized, and it's great to see. I'm sorry, I'll see myself out. While navigating in the underground cave is safer than out on the surface, you do have the disadvantage of not knowing where the searchlights above are, unless they're right on top of you, and of course, you have to venture out some to find some of the apparatuses you've been tasked with repairing. The same minigame as before is present, although it's much quicker, and while at first it may seem like it really doesn't need to be because of all this open area you have for just one searchlight. Yep, that's right, not one, not two, but 3 searchlights all emerge one by one as you progress throughout the encounter. Not only are there more of them, but they're now much less predictable in their movement patterns. They can turn any direction at any time, making them a much more challenging foe than before. This is a great way to test the skills the player had learned in the previous encounter, and I'm really impressed at how well it was executed. Once you've prepared all the apparatuses in this section, you'll be guided to the center of the map by a bright beam of light and a loud beeping sound. These are great ways of telegraphing to the player where they need to get to, and it gets used once again once you pull pull the switch to guide you back. By making you travel to and from the center of the map, the game is ensuring you get plenty of time with your fishy friends. But you're not quite done yet, as we've still got a few more switches left to pull. PA Guy guides you to these side tunnels where you have to swim from switch to switch, while the searchlights loom overhead. The ideal path is marked out using these pipes in the floor, with regular spots to shelter and assess the situation to plan your next move. Finally, after dodging death by fishhook for the last time, you're rewarded with a super awesome cutscene that just feels so good to watch after all you've survived.
Pressure is a game that has only gotten better with time. The developers have brought plenty of fresh ideas to the table and are still continuing to do so even now. What I've covered today isn't even half the content in the game. There's plenty more to see, so if you still haven't, go play the game. That link should be down in the description. Massive kudos to Zeal and the rest of the Pressure team for such a phenomenal game. Keep up the great work. And for all of you watching, thank you so much for sticking around. Stay safe out there.